Mornings in my house always start the same way. The antique clock in the living room strikes 6 times, and I wake up a minute later. This habit, developed over decades, still holds true now that I'm 68. Fielding called me his living chronometer. Precision is the courtesy of kings and the dignity of Yvonne Holloway, he used to say, smiling with the corners of his lips. I reach out to the empty half of the bed. 10 years have passed, and my hand still seeks the warmth of his body in the morning. The pillow has long since lost the scent of his aftershave, but sometimes I think I smell the faint, ghostly scent of cedar and bergamot. Is 10 years a long time or a short time? For grief is an eternity, for memory a moment. The Victorian mansion on Elmwood Avenue in Naperville is too big for a single woman. 5 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a library, a study, a spacious kitchen where Fielding and I love to prepare Sunday lunches for friends. Now, these rooms are empty most of the time. Only the library and the bedroom retain life. The rest of the house seemed to have fallen into hibernation, awaiting the return of an owner who would never come back. Fielding Holloway wasn't just an architect. He was an artist of space. He transformed buildings as easily as others change wallpaper. His projects were valued for their special atmosphere that words cannot describe. Architecture is frozen music, he liked to say, quoting Goethe. And our house was his best work. I throw on my robe and go into the kitchen. I make tea, strong Darjeeling as always. Fielding preferred coffee, but I was never a coffee drinker. It's funny how marriages maintain these little differences. We lived together for 42 years, but never changed each other's minds on the matter of morning beverages. Outside the window, Naperville is waking up. Neat houses, manicured lawns. The city has always seemed like the perfect backdrop for the American dream. We moved here in 1998 when Fielding was asked to design the new Northwestern College building. We planned to stay for a couple years, but the city pulled us in, became home. A phone call breaks into the stillness of the morning. My son's name pops up on the screen. Baxter. I hesitate for a few seconds before answering. It's strange that he's calling so early. Good morning, Mom. His voice sounds more chipper than usual. I hope I didn't wake you up. You know I get up at 6. I answer. Is something wrong? Nothing much. I just wanted to remind you that Rosamond and I will be stopping by this afternoon, about 3 o'clock. You haven't forgotten? I haven't forgotten, although I must admit I wish I hadn't. Lately, every meeting with my son and daughter-in-law had turned into a hidden confrontation. Of course I remember, I said. I'll bake your favorite apple pie. Don't bother, Mother, he said, a condescending tone in his voice. Rosamond thinks you should get more rest. At your age, you shouldn't be standing at the stove for hours on end. At my age. It's a phrase that's come up more and more often in our conversations. It was as if retirement had turned me into a fragile porcelain statue to be protected from the slightest breeze. I feel fine, Baxter, and I like to cook. Whatever you say, Mom. I'll see you then. I hang up the phone and go back to my cooled tea. Seeing my son now always gives me mixed feelings. I love him. He's my flesh and blood, my only child. But since Fielding's death, something has changed in our relationship. It's as if the buffer that softened our personalities has disappeared. Baxter was always more like me than his father. The same single-mindedness, bordering on stubbornness. The same desire to control the situation. Fielding had a knack for smoothing things over, finding compromises. Without him, my son and I are like two identical magnets, pulling away from each other. I'm getting apples out of the fridge for pie. Contrary to Rosamond's opinion, I'm not going to turn into a helpless old woman. As long as my hands can hold a rolling pin and my mind can remember recipes, I will bake pies. As I roll out the dough, I remember the conversations Fielding and I had about the future. We weren't naive romantics. Both of us grew up in families where money was a constant conflict. His parents went broke during the recession of the 70s and never recovered. Mine were forever arguing over every dollar spent. We vowed that our marriage would not be ruined by financial problems. Yvonne, we must secure our independence no matter what happens, Fielding said in our first year of marriage. And so we sprang into action. First, it was small investments in stocks, then the first apartment rented out. When his architectural firm began to bring in a steady income, we moved on to more serious investments. In 1993, we traveled to Venice for the first time. Fielding was working on the restoration of a palazzo. I fell in love with the city at first sight. When the opportunity arose to buy a small apartment in the Dorsoduro district, we didn't hesitate for a minute. 5 years later, we bought a second apartment in Cannaregio. Both properties were registered in my name. Our Italian insurance, joked Fielding. But we both realized it wasn't just a joke. These apartments were our emergency airfield, a place of refuge from any storm. The Swiss account came later when Fielding's business expanded into international projects. Keep this information confidential, he said, handing me the documents. Even from Baxter, especially from Baxter. I didn't pay much attention to those words at the time. Our son was still a student with a passion for economics and finance. What did it matter if he knew about our savings? Now I realize the wisdom of Fielding's foresight. He was always a better judge of character than I was. He saw what was behind the facade of smiles and affability. Perhaps he had already noticed traits in our son that would come to full fruition after his death. At 3 hours and 15 minutes, the doorbell rang. Baxter and Rosamond are never on time. This little detail has always annoyed Fielding. Punctuality is respect for other people's time, he used to say. Our son never learned that lesson. Opening the door. Baxter resembles his father in appearance. The same dark hair with graying at the temples, the same tall stature and broad shoulders. But the expression on his face is different, more tense, as if he's constantly solving a difficult problem. Rosamond is his exact opposite, miniature with perfectly styled blonde hair and flawless makeup. Her smile always seems to be rehearsed in front of the mirror, not a millimeter to the side, a perfect curve of the lips, a precisely measured dose of joy. Mom, you look tired. Baxter's first words in lieu of greeting. Did you sleep well? Hello, son. Hello, Rosamond. I ignore his remark. Come in, the pie's ready. Yvonne, have you been at the stove all day again? Rosamond takes off her designer coat. We said it wasn't necessary. It's a pleasure for me, darling. We go into the kitchen. Cleanliness and order have always been my pride. Rosamond looks around the room with an appraising eye. I know what she's thinking. Outdated design, old-fashioned appliances. In their house, the kitchen is like an operating room. Chrome, glass, minimalist. Mom, there's something important we wanted to talk to you about. Baxter sits down at the table, declining the offered tea. It's about the house. Here it is. I've been waiting for this conversation. The hints have been getting more and more transparent over the last few months. I'm listening, I say quietly, pouring tea into cups from a set that Fielding and I bought in London 30 years ago. Rosamond and I think that this house is too big for you alone, Baxter says in a prepared speech. It takes a lot of effort and money to maintain a mansion like this. You're retired, you have to think about the future. Your father left enough for me to keep the house, I said. I'm comfortable here. But it's unsustainable, Mom, Rosamond interjects. Why pay to heat empty rooms? We found a great apartment in a new complex for the elderly. It has medical staff, a gym, a swimming pool. For the elderly, I repeat, noting the wording. A nursing home, in other words. It's a modern apartment complex. Rosamond wrinkles her nose slightly, as if at a sour lemon. There are some very interesting people your age living there. You'll be able to socialize, make new acquaintances. I have friends. I cut off a piece of pie and put it on Baxter's plate. And I'm not ready to sell the house I've lived in most of my life. No one's talking about selling, Baxter quickly interjects, though that's exactly what he's thinking. You could rent it out. It'll be extra income for you. And I'll live in a modern apartment complex. I finish for him. No, thank you. I'll stay here. Mom, be reasonable, Baxter said, a note of irritation in his voice. You're 68. You've got to think about the future. I think about it every day, I replied calmly, and I don't plan to move. Yvonne, Rosamond goes on the offensive. We're worried about you. Last week you forgot our call. The day before yesterday you couldn't remember the name of the letter carrier, even though he's been working here for 2 years. These are troubling signs. I look at my sister-in-law, trying to figure out if she really believes what she's saying or if she's just using a convenient argument. Forgetfulness is a convenient accusation. Any slip-up can be blamed on age and the onset of dementia. I don't remember the mailman's name because I'm not interested in him, Rosamond, I reply. And your call has slipped my mind because I had a book club meeting that day that ran late. It's called Prioritizing, Not Senile Dementia. Baxter sighs, exchanges a look with his wife. I see in that look a silent message. She's getting difficult. We're going to have to do things differently. Okay, Mom, let's not talk about that now. He suddenly changes tactics. How's your garden? Are the roses blooming yet? This abrupt shift from pressure to small talk is another troubling sign. They haven't backed down. They're just taking a pause. They'll look for other approaches, other arguments. The rest of the visit is spent in tense politeness. We talk about the weather, about the new exhibition at the gallery where Rosamond works, about the grandchildren's school successes. The pie remains almost untouched. Rosamond is watching her figure, and Baxter has already had lunch. When they finally leave, I stand at the window for a long time, watching their silver SUV pull out of the driveway. What would Fielding say when he sees what our son has become? A financial analyst, always complaining about not having enough money, yet changing his car every 2 years. A man who sees his own mother as a burden and a potential inheritance. I go into Fielding's study, the only room I haven't remodeled since his death. Everything here is the same as the day he left the desk, with the blueprints, the bookshelves, the old leather chair. I open the secret drawer in the desk, where the documents for the Venetian apartment and the Swiss account information are kept. Everything is in order. Everything is in place. You were right, darling, I say into the emptiness of the room. The independence should have been secured. Thank you for insisting. That evening I call Pearl Edmonds, my oldest friend, and the only person besides Fielding who knows about my overseas assets. I met her in college, and she's been a loyal friend for decades. They came again, I say without preamble. Did they hint at the nursing home again? Pearl always grasps the point instantly. A state-of-the-art senior housing complex, I clarify sarcastically. Imagine, Rosamond's already got me an apartment there. That's very thoughtful. They're not gonna back down, Yvonne. Pearl's voice is troubled. The Victorian mansion in downtown Naperville is too big a piece of property. I know, I sigh, but I'm not backing down either. Maybe we should tell them, Pearl suggests cautiously, about Venice, about the score. It would cool their appetite. No, I answer firmly. Fielding kept that information from Baxter for a reason. If they knew about the money, it would only increase their pressure. They'll want everything, not just the house. We talked to Pearl for a long time. She's the only person I can be completely honest with. Even with Fielding in the last years of his life, I didn't always share my fears and doubts for fear of upsetting his weak heart. Before I go to bed, I walk through the rooms of the house again, checking the windows and doors, a habit from when Fielding and I were here alone. In my son's empty bedroom, now a guest room, I stop at a picture of little Baxter and his father. They're flying a kite in the park. Fielding laughs. Baxter looks at him with adoration. When and why did that adoration turn to cold calculation? What went wrong in our family? Unanswered questions. As I lie in bed, I think about how Fielding and I once planned to grow old in this house, surrounded by a loving family. Now, instead of family warmth, it's a cold war over square footage and inheritance. I'm not going down without a fight. If Baxter and Rosamond think they're dealing with a helpless old lady, they're in for a big disappointment. I have resources they don't even know they have, and I'm ready to use them when the time comes. It was a surprisingly warm April morning. I was drinking coffee on the veranda, watching a pair of robins nesting in an old apple tree. Fielding had planted that tree our first year in Naperville. A house without an orchard is not a house, just a building, he used to say. The apple tree survived 3 hurricanes and one harsh winter when the temperature dropped to -30. A hardy creature, like myself. The doorbell rang, taking me by surprise. I wasn't expecting visitors, and delivery men usually leave packages on the porch. When I opened the door, I saw Baxter, Rosamond, and a strange woman holding a leather folder. "Mom, good morning." Baxter smiled a little too broadly. "I hope we're not too early. This is Helena Price. She'd like to see the house." A tour of the house? I looked from one face to the other. "Why?" "Mrs. Holloway." The stranger held out her hand. "I'm a realtor with Premium Estates. Your son tells me you're planning a sale, and I'd like to appraise the property." I didn't shake the outstretched hand. Instead, I turned to Baxter. "I'm not planning to sell the house. Who gave you the right to bring realtors here?" "Mom, we just wanted to know the market value." Baxter tried to defuse the situation. "That doesn't obligate you to do anything." "I know the market value of my house." My voice sounded colder than I intended. "And I don't need an outsider to help me determine it." Rosamond intervened with her trademark smile. "Yvonne, dear, don't take it personally. We just wanted to help. Real estate prices in Naperville are on the rise, and your house could be worth a lot more than you think right now." "I'm not selling the house," I repeated slowly, enunciating each word clearly. "I'm sorry, Miss Price, but you've wasted your time." The realtor looked at Baxter in confusion. He avoided my gaze. "I understand," Helena said at last. "I apologize for the inconvenience. If you change your mind, here's my card." I mechanically took the cardboard rectangle, but as soon as the trio left the porch, I tore it into small pieces. That evening, Baxter called to apologize. His voice sounded genuinely remorseful, but I knew my son too well. He could feign any emotion when it was necessary to accomplish a goal. "Mom, I'm sorry we barged in like this without warning. Helena happened to be in town passing through, and I thought it would be a good opportunity to get a professional evaluation. Next time, please coordinate such visits with me," I said, trying to remain calm. "I don't like surprises." "Of course, Mom. By the way, Rosamond and I wanted to invite you to dinner on Saturday. Nothing fancy, just a family evening." I said yes, even though my inner voice warned me of the danger. After the realtor incident, I was even more wary of any initiatives by my son and daughter-in-law. The dinner went relatively smoothly, though not without some unpleasant moments. Rosamond had prepared some fancy vegetarian dish that tasted like cardboard flavored with herbs. Their house, as always, was spotlessly clean and sterile, as if they didn't live in it, but just photographed it for a real estate catalog. "Baxter showed me an apartment at Sunset Gardens today," Rosamond said casually as we moved on to dessert. "It's a new senior center, It's gorgeous. Pool, spa, 24-hour medical care. Interesting. I took a sip of wine. Why was Baxter looking at this apartment? Well, Mom, my son blushed slightly. We're thinking about the future, your future. I'm planning my future, I replied, and it doesn't include moving into a nursing home, whatever you want to call it. Yvonne, Rosamond leaned slightly toward me. It's not a nursing home. It's an upscale assisted living complex. Very well-off people live there, who are in their 70s, I finished for her. Thank you, but no. Mom, Baxter went into a prepared argument. Your house needs constant maintenance. The roof needs repair. The heating system is outdated. It's gonna take a lot of money, and Sunset Gardens will take care of all that. I can afford to hire workers to fix the roof, I said, and the heating works fine. Fielding installed a new system only 15 years ago. 15 years is an eternity for modern technology, Rosamond interjected. There are much more efficient systems now. The conversation went on like that for some time. I steadfastly rejected all offers to move. They insisted with polite insistence. As we moved on to coffee, Baxter suddenly changed the subject. By the way, Mom, we're having a little financial trouble, he said casually, as if he were talking about the weather. The market is unstable, and my investments aren't yielding the returns I expected. I'm sorry, I replied sincerely. Despite our differences, I was worried about my son. What can I do to help? Oh, nothing much, he said with a wave of his hand. I just wanted you to know. We may have to postpone our trip to Europe this summer. Rosamond's upset. She was so excited to show the kids Italy. Italy? I felt my back muscles tense up. What part of Italy were you planning to visit? Venice? Florence? Rome? Rosamond answered with a look of longing. A classic itinerary. But now I guess I'll have to wait. Unless? She did not finish the sentence, but there was an unspoken, unless you help us with money. Maybe I can help a little, I said, though I had no intention of doing so. Let's talk about it later, Baxter. He nodded, a flicker of satisfaction in his eyes. The plan had worked. Mom was sympathetic and willing to shell out the money. If only he knew how transparent his manipulations were to me. The next week, their tactics became even more aggressive. Rosamond happened to be at my house with some woman she introduced as a space organizer. Yvonne, this is Olivia. She helps people get rid of clutter and create a more functional interior. Rosamond chirped as I stood on the doorstep, blocking their way into the house. I thought you could use her help. There are so many antiques. She said the word antiques as if she were talking about garbage. Thank you, Rosamond, but I'm quite happy with my antiques. I emphasized the last word. And I don't need the services of a space organizer. Olivia, a professional and collected woman in her 40s, was clearly uncomfortable. Mrs. Holloway, I understand your concern. Many of my clients are wary at first of the idea of letting go of things they're used to, she said softly, as if speaking to a child. But then they feel so relieved. Imagine how much easier it will be to take care of the house without all these objects. Olivia, I looked her straight in the eye. These objects are my life. The paintings my husband and I have collected over the years. Books we've read together. Souvenirs from our travels. I'm not going to turn my home into a sterile space to please someone else's idea of modern design. Rosamond pursed her lips. Olivia mumbled an apology, and they left. I closed the door and leaned back against it, feeling my knees shake. This constant siege was starting to get on my nerves. In the evening, Baxter called, apologizing for his wife's initiative. You know Rosamond, Mother, he said, his voice sounding tired. She just wants what's best for her. Sometimes she goes a little overboard. Baxter, I decided to be blunt. What's going on? Why are you always trying to get me to move or change the house? Nothing's going on, Mom. He sounded almost convincing. We're just worried about you. This house is too big. It takes a lot of strength to maintain. I have enough strength, I replied, and I'm hiring help for the garden and general cleaning. Everything is under control. Of course, Mother. His tone became condescending. Just think about our suggestions, okay? No rush. I hung up the phone, feeling a growing unease. Their insistence seemed excessive for simple concern for an elderly mother. Something else was behind these attempts. The answer came 3 days later when I received a letter from a Venetian bank. Usually correspondence from Italy came to the P.O. box I had rented especially for this purpose, but this time, for some reason, the bank sent the letter to my home address. I was just opening the envelope with the Banco di Venezia logo when the doorbell rang. I shoved the letter into the pocket of my robe and went to open the door. Rosamond stood on the doorstep with a basket of fruit. Yvonne, good morning, she said with a smile. I was passing by and thought I'd drop off some fresh fruit for you. They're organic from the farmer's market. Thank you, Rosamond. I took the basket without inviting her in. That's very nice of you. Can I come in for a minute? She was already taking a step forward. I'd like a cup of tea. It's been such a hectic day. It was impossible to refuse without being overtly rude. I reluctantly stepped back, letting my sister-in-law into the house. Of course, come into the kitchen. I'll put the kettle on. Rosamond followed me, her eyes gliding quickly through the rooms as if she were taking inventory. She sat down at the table in the kitchen, chatting casually about exhibitions and charity events. I put the kettle on and took out the cups. Your letter fell out, Rosamond said suddenly, pointing to the floor. I turned around and saw that an envelope from a Venetian bank had indeed slipped out of the pocket of my robe. Rosamond had already bent down to pick it up. I'll take it, I said quickly, ahead of her by just a second, but she could see the logo and part of the sender's address. Banco di Venezia? Her eyebrows rose in feigned surprise. You get letters from an Italian bank, Yvonne? It's an advertisement, I lied, tucking the envelope into my pocket. You know how banks are aggressively promoting their services these days, even internationally. Rosamond obviously didn't believe me, but she didn't insist. Her gaze, however, became more evaluative. By the way, Yvonne, she changed the subject. Have you thought about updating your will? Baxter is worried that the documents may be out of date. It's been 10 years since Fielding died. That's what it is. The will, the inheritance, the money. It all came down to this. My will is in perfect order, Rosamond, I replied, pouring the tea. Fielding had made sure that all the legal documents had been drawn up correctly. But 10 years is a long time, she persisted. Laws change. Maybe we should consult a new lawyer. We have a great friend who specializes in inheritance cases. Thank you for your concern, but I'm quite satisfied with my current lawyer. I put a cup of tea in front of her. Lemon? Rosamond stayed for another half hour or so, continuing to probe my finances and assets. I answered evasively, trying not to betray my growing irritation. When she finally left, I breathed a sigh of relief and took the letter out of my pocket. It was a standard notification about the status of my account and the need to confirm that my contact information was up to date. It was nothing special, but the very fact that Rosamond had seen the envelope worried me. What if she told Baxter? What if they started digging deeper? I called the bank and asked them to send all correspondence exclusively to the P.O. box from now on, or better yet, to switch to electronic notifications. Then I dialed Pearl's number. They're up to something, I said without preamble when she answered the phone. Rosamond saw a letter from the Venetian bank today. Shit, Pearl swore, which rarely happened to her. Did she realize what it was? I'm not sure. But right afterward, she started talking about the will. I don't like it, Yvonne. Pearl's voice sounded concerned. They're trying too hard to control your finances and property. It goes beyond normal family concern. I know, I sighed. Baxter had mentioned financial difficulties the other day. Said he couldn't afford a trip to Europe, Italy. Coincidence? Pearl sounded doubtful. I don't think so. I think he suspects something. Maybe he found some old documents in Fielding's things, or noticed my regular trips to Venice. You must be very careful, Pearl said. If they find out about your assets, the pressure will only increase. I know. I'm changing passwords to all my accounts and rechecking my privacy settings. Fielding always said that paranoia is an investor's best friend. Pearl grinned. He was a smart man, Fielding. All right, keep me in the loop. And if you need anything, call me anytime. After talking to Pearl, I decided to do some investigating of my own. Baxter had mentioned financial difficulties, but how serious were they? He's always lived large, expensive cars, vacations to exotic resorts, private school for his children. But was he really in trouble, or was this just a way to make me feel sorry for him? I opened my laptop and began searching for information about the company where Baxter worked. The news was disappointing. The firm was really going through some bad times. Several failed investments, major clients leaving, an SEC investigation. Perhaps its financial problems were real. But that didn't explain the obsession with my house. Even if I sold it and gave all the money to Baxter, it wouldn't solve his problems forever. There was something else at work here. I remembered Rosamond had once mentioned that her gallery was planning to open a branch in Europe. Venice would be the perfect place, she had said then. Was it a coincidence? Or had they somehow found out about my apartment? A phone call interrupted my musings. The number was unfamiliar. Mrs. Holloway? A man's voice asked. This is Dr. Richardson from the Evergreen Clinic. Your son made an appointment for a cognitive evaluation. We'd like to confirm the appointment for next Tuesday at 10 o'clock in the morning. I felt the blood rush to my face with anger. Dr. Richardson. My voice sounded icily calm. My son has no right to make an appointment for me without my consent. I will not be attending this counseling session, and I would advise your clinic to check if the person making appointments for elderly relatives has the proper credentials. Yeah, I'm sorry, Mrs. Holloway. The doctor was clearly embarrassed. We didn't know. Your son said you were experiencing memory and orientation problems. My son is wrong, I retorted. Good day, doctor. I hung up the phone, feeling my hands shaking. So this is how far they're willing to go, to try to prove that I was incompetent. It wasn't just pressure anymore, it was a threat. I called Pearl again. Baxter's trying to send me to a cognitive specialist, I said as soon as she answered. He wants to prove I have dementia. What a bastard, Pearl didn't hesitate to say. I'm sorry, Yvonne, but your son is out of line. I know. I felt strangely calm after the initial shock. But at least now I know what I'm dealing with. It's not just greed or concern for my well-being. This is an attempt to exert control over my property. What are you going to do? Pearl asked. First, I'm going to talk to my lawyer. I'll make sure that all the paperwork is in order and that Baxter can't gain access to my estate, even if I'm declared incompetent. Then I'll prepare for battle, because it looks like there's no avoiding it. I'm on your side, Pearl said firmly. What can I do to help? Just stay close, I said, and if anything happens to me, you know where all the documents and contacts are. You're the only person I trust completely. After my conversation with Pearl, I sat in Fielding's office for a long time, looking at his picture. What would he do in my shoes? How would he handle his own son trying to take away his home and independence? I knew the answer. Fielding never backed down in the face of adversity. He was a gentle man, but with an iron rod inside. Never let fear rule your decisions, he often said, and I wouldn't let it. I pulled a folder from the safe with the deeds to the Venetian apartment and the Swiss account information. Everything was in order. The title was in my name. The will had been drawn up so that Baxter couldn't contest it. Fielding had thought of everything. But there was one problem that even Fielding couldn't foresee. Our son could try to have me declared incompetent. In that case, all legal barriers would fall. I needed a plan. I opened my laptop and began researching the laws on capacity and guardianship for the elderly. Then I compiled a list of doctors who could give an independent opinion on my mental state. Finally, I wrote an email to my attorney requesting an emergency appointment. The war was on, and I was ready to fight. For my home, for my independence, for the respect I deserved. Baxter and Rosamond had made a grave mistake in underestimating me. They thought they were dealing with a helpless old woman. Pretty soon they'd realize how wrong they'd been. The invitation to dinner came by email. Baxter had chosen La Sorrento, an Italian restaurant in downtown Naperville, one of the most expensive in town. Fielding and I used to go there for our wedding anniversaries, but after his death, I avoided the place. Too many memories. In the text of the invitation, Baxter mentioned an important family conversation and the need for reconciliation. He italicized the adjective family, which struck me as an odd emphasis. Rosamond added a postscript. Please come, Yvonne. This is really important to all of us. I showed the letter to Pearl when she stopped by my place later that evening. Sounds like a trap, she said, handing me back my phone. Something they're up to. I agree, I sighed. But if I say no, they'll use it as further proof of my aloofness and strange behavior. I'd better go and see what they're up to. Be careful. Pearl squeezed my hand. And remember, you don't have to agree to anything. Don't sign any documents, even if it looks like a mere formality. I wasn't born yesterday. I smiled. Fielding taught me to read every line before signing, especially if the document was being slipped to me by a smiling relative. On the day of dinner, I paid more attention to my appearance than usual. I chose a navy blue dress that emphasized the color of my eyes. A pearl necklace Fielding had given me for our 30th wedding anniversary, and silver sapphire earrings. I wasn't going to look like a helpless old lady who could be intimidated into signing anything. The cab pulled up outside the restaurant at 7 p.m. sharp. Baxter was already waiting for me at the entrance, glancing nervously at his watch. Mom, you're as precise as always. He kissed my cheek. He smelled of expensive cologne and slight anxiety. You look beautiful. Thank you. I smiled, noting to myself that it was the second time he'd looked at his watch in 30 seconds. Is everything okay? You seem tense. Everything's fine, he answered too quickly. Rosamond is already inside. We have a private office booked. A private office. Interesting. Under normal circumstances, it might have been explained by a desire to talk without prying ears. But now it only made me more suspicious. Rosamond greeted us with a flawless smile. She wore a cream dress that I was sure cost more than the average American's monthly pension. Sitting next to her were my grandchildren, 11-year-old Avery and 9-year-old Piper. Their presence came as a surprise to me. Grandma, Piper jumped up and hugged me. I missed you. I missed you too, honey. I hugged her back, feeling a prick of conscience. I really hadn't seen much of my grandchildren lately, partly because of the strained relationship with their parents, partly because Baxter and Rosamond were always keeping the kids busy with extra classes. Dinner began casually. We talked about school, the latest movies, plans for the summer. The kids talked about their successes. Avery had won the school math Olympiad. Piper had won first place in a drawing contest. I listened with genuine interest, proud of their accomplishments. But gradually, I began to notice oddities. Baxter and Rosamond exchanged meaningful glances. Rosamond fidgeted nervously with her napkin. Baxter twice started to talk about the future of the family, but each time he cut himself short. When dessert arrived, tiramisu for the children and panna cotta for the adults, Baxter suddenly looked at his watch and announced, "Kids, remember, we were talking about that special movie in the theater? It starts in 20 minutes. Your Aunt Gloria is waiting for you out front." Avery and Piper looked surprised, but didn't mind the sudden trip to the movies. Rosamond quickly helped them pack, and in 5 minutes it was just the three of us, me, Baxter, and his wife. "Now," said Baxter as the study door closed behind the children, "let's talk business." "What business?" I asked, though I already knew where this was going. Baxter pulled a file from the leather briefcase next to his chair. "Mom, Rosamond and I have been thinking about your future for a long time," he began. "You know we love you and want what's best for you." Of course, I remained calm, though my heart began to beat faster. "The house you live in is becoming a burden to you," he continued. "It's too big, too much maintenance. It's too big. It requires constant upkeep, and there's the constant expense of property taxes, insurance, and utilities." "I can handle it," I replied. "I have enough money." "But how long will it last?" Rosamond intervened. "Prices are going up. Medical services are getting more expensive. What if you get sick and need expensive treatment?" "I have good insurance," I tried to say calmly, though my insides were seething with resentment. "And I'd been saving for a rainy day my whole life." "Mom," Baxter put his hand on the file, "we have a solution that will keep you safe and comfortable for the rest of your life." He opened the folder and pulled out several sheets printed on expensive watermarked paper. "This is the deed to the trust," he explained. "You'll live in it, but we'll take care of all maintenance and financial matters. In return, after when you're gone, the house will pass to us to provide for Avery and Piper's future." I took the papers and began to read carefully. Even a quick glance was enough to get the gist of it. It wasn't a management trust, but an outright transfer of ownership to Baxter and Rosamond, with the stipulation that I could stay in the house until I died. The new owners would make all decisions about repairs, remodeling, and even interior decoration. "It's not a trust," I said, setting the papers aside. "It's a deed of gift with a life estate. I'm basically giving you the house right now." Baxter blushed slightly. "Technically, yes, but it's for your own good. We can take better care of the house if it's officially ours." "What's stopping you from helping me with the house now?" I asked. "You don't need to change ownership for that." "Yvonne," Rosamond leaned across the table to me, "let's be honest. You're getting older. Your memory isn't what it used to be. What if you forget to pay your insurance or property taxes? What if you make a bad repair decision and waste money?" "My memory is perfectly fine," I replied coldly. "And if I ever feel like I can't handle managing my property, I'll hire a professional property manager, not family members." Baxter's face changed. The mask of the caring son began to fall away. "Mom, you don't understand the gravity of the situation." His voice became harsher. "Rosamond and I have spent a lot of time and effort preparing this treaty. It really is in your best interests." "It's in my best interest to remain mistress of my own home." I closed the folder and pushed it away from me. "I'm not signing it." Rosamond changed tactics, her voice mellifluous. "Yvonne, think of your grandchildren. You want them to be provided for, don't you? This house is a significant part of their inheritance." "I've already taken care of the grandchildren in my will," I replied. "They'll get their share when the time comes, but not before." Baxter straightened sharply. There was a cold glint in his eyes that reminded me of my father-in-law in his worst days. Mom, I didn't want to say this, but you're leaving us no choice. He lowered his voice to a threatening whisper. I have a preliminary report from Dr. Richardson. He thinks you're in the early stages of dementia. If you don't sign these papers voluntarily, we can start the process of declaring you incompetent. I felt the blood drain from my face. That's it. The call from Dr. Richardson was no accident. Baxter had already started setting the stage. This is ridiculous, I said, trying to keep my voice firm. Any independent doctor will attest to my sanity. Maybe, Baxter shrugged, but the process will take time. There will be hearings, examinations, testimony. Think of the stress that would cause. At your age, that kind of stress could seriously jeopardize your health. Are you threatening me? I couldn't believe my own son would do such a thing. I'm offering you an easy way out. He pushed the folder toward me. Sign it, and we can forget about this conversation. Everything stays in the family. I looked at Rosamond. She was avoiding my gaze, staring at her unfinished glass of wine. And if I refuse? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Then, Baxter leaned back in his chair, we'll have to go through the courts, and I'm afraid our relationship will suffer greatly. You won't be able to see Avery and Piper. We can't let them hang out with a grandmother who, doesn't quite understand reality. You're using your own children as weapons? I couldn't hide the disgust in my voice. I'm protecting my family. He cut me off, including you, even though you don't realize it. I felt the anger building inside me, a deep, burning anger. But with it came a surprising clarity of thought. I suddenly saw the situation in all its ugliness. My son, my only child, had turned into a greedy, petty man, willing to blackmail his own mother for real estate. Baxter, I said calmly, I'm not signing those papers. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. Mom, his tone became threatening. Think again. You will be deprived of your family. No visits from grandchildren, no holidays together, no support in times of need. I almost laughed. Family? The same family that's trying to take my house away from me right now? The one that's threatening to declare me crazy if I don't comply? It's not a family, Baxter. It's a racket. Yvonne? Rosamond finally spoke, her voice shaking with tension. Don't jump to conclusions. We're all on edge, saying things we don't mean. Oh, I think that's exactly what Baxter means, I said, looking my son in the eye. He's always been stubborn and determined, but there used to be other qualities in him. Honesty, fairness, concern for his fellow man. Where have they gone, son? Baxter blushed, but didn't look away. You're living in the past, Mom, he said. The world has changed. You can't let sentimentality get in the way of practical solutions. Ice, blackmailing your own mother is a practical solution? I shook my head. Your father would have been disappointed. It was a low blow, and I knew it. Baxter had always idolized his father, even when he'd rebelled against him as a teenager. The mention of Fielding's disappointment hit the mark. Don't you dare tell me what my father would have thought. Baxter slammed his fist on the table, making the dishes bounce. You have no right. I was his wife for 42 years, I said quietly. I knew him better than anyone else, and I know what he would have said when he saw his son and daughter-in-law trying to take the house from an elderly woman. Rosamond intervened, trying to lighten the mood. Let's all calm down. Maybe today isn't the best day for this kind of decision. Yvonne, take the documents home. Study them in peace. We can come back to this conversation in a week, but Baxter wouldn't back down. No, he pushed the folder towards me. Decide now, Mom. Sign it or you'll lose your family. His voice trailed off into a shout, drawing the attention of the waiter, who peered into the office to see if everything was all right. Rosamond gave him a strained smile and assured him that everything was fine, just a family discussion. As the door closed, I gathered my purse and stood up. "I'm not signing those papers," I said firmly. "And don't think that threats will make me change my mind. I've seen worse things in my life than the anger of a spoiled man. You'll regret this." Baxter stood up too. "I swear you will." "I already am," I said, "for not seeing what you were becoming, for failing to instill in you the values your father held dear. It's my fault, and I have to live with it." I turned to leave, but Rosamond grabbed my arm. "Yvonne, please don't go like that," she said, panic in her eyes. "We can discuss this calmly." "There's nothing more to discuss." I released her hand. "Tell Avery and Piper that Grandma loves them, if you let them hear it." I walked out of the office with my head held high, even though I was shaking inside from the shock of the experience. The restaurant was crowded, but no one paid attention to the elderly woman who had just lost her family. It was drizzling outside. I hadn't brought an umbrella, counting on Baxter to give me a ride home. Now I had to call a cab and wait for it under the restaurant's visor, trying not to cry in public. When the cab finally arrived, I gave the address and leaned back in the seat, feeling incredibly tired. The driver, a young guy with dreadlocks, gave me a concerned look in the rearview mirror. "Everything okay, ma'am?" he asked. "You look upset." "Family problems," I replied succinctly. "It's nothing. At home, the first thing I did was call Pearl. She listened without interruption to my story of the failed dinner, and then launched into such a tirade against Baxter and Rosamond that I smiled in spite of the pain in my heart. "Come to my place," Pearl suggested when she'd let off some steam. "Don't be alone tonight." "Thanks, but I need to be in my own house," I replied, "to feel its walls, its protection. It's what I fought for today." "I understand," Pearl said after a pause. "But if you change your mind, call me anytime. I'll come get you, even if it's 3 in the morning." After talking to Pearl, I walked slowly around the house, touching familiar objects as if I were saying hello to them. In my husband's study, I stopped in front of his portrait. "What am I going to do, darling?" I asked aloud. "How do I fight my own son?" I walked over to his desk and opened a secret drawer. The documents for the Venetian apartment were where I'd left them. The Swiss account information was safely tucked away elsewhere. These were my trump cards that Baxter and Rosamond didn't even know about. Sitting down at my desk, I pulled out a notepad and pen. It was time to plan a counterattack. Baxter thought he had me cornered, but he didn't know all my resources. I didn't know his father had anticipated this situation and prepared me for it. The first item on my list was to see a lawyer. I had to make sure all my paperwork was in order, and no machinations by Baxter could take away my control of my assets. The second item was a visit to an independent doctor to evaluate my cognitive state. I needed an official report refuting insinuations of incipient dementia. Third was a review and possibly a reissuance of all financial instruments associated with my overseas assets. And finally, and most importantly, I had to decide how to use my financial advantage. Simply defending myself wasn't enough. I had to show Baxter and Rosamond that I was not a helpless victim, but a worthy adversary. I began the morning after the disastrous dinner with a phone call to Lawrence Jenkins, our family lawyer. Fielding and I had known him for over 30 years. He had helped us with the purchase of our Naperville home, drafted all the important documents, including Fielding's will. Now in his 70s, Lawrence was still practicing, albeit on a limited basis, handling only the affairs of longtime clients. "Lawrence, I need an urgent consultation," I said as soon as he picked up the phone. "It's about Baxter's attempt to take over my house." There was a pause and then a heavy sigh. "Yvonne, I was afraid it would come to this. When can you come to the office? In an hour, if it's convenient for you. I'll wait for you, he replied briefly. Lawrence's office was in an old red brick building in downtown Naperville. Oak paneling, leather chairs, and huge bookcases of legal tomes created an atmosphere of reliability and tradition. I always felt protected here. Tell me, Lawrence said as we settled into his office with cups of tea. He listened attentively to the story of the restaurant ultimatum without interrupting, making occasional notes in his notebook. So they're threatening to declare you incompetent? He said thoughtfully when I finished. It's serious, Yvonne, but not as serious as they think it is. Explain, I asked. You see, declaring a person incompetent is a long and complicated process. You need strong medical evidence, the opinions of several specialists, witness testimony. Considering that you're obviously of sound mind and full memory, their chances are slim to none. But Baxter mentioned some kind of report from Dr. Richardson. Which you didn't even visit, Lawrence grinned. Any court would dismiss such an opinion as unreliable, but let's be on the safe side. I'll arrange for you to see Dr. Eleanor Price. She's a leading gerontologist and neurologist specializing specifically in cognitive impairment in the elderly. Her opinion will be a strong argument in your favor. I nodded, relieved that we had a concrete plan of action. What about the deeds to the house? Couldn't Baxter somehow get around me and get the deed to it? Not if we're vigilant. Lawrence pulled a folder with my name on it out of his desk drawer. I've been through all the paperwork. The house is in your name only, and after Fielding died, you became the sole owner. No liens, no co-owners. Baxter has no legal rights to the property. What if he does get me declared incompetent? That was the question that kept bugging me. Then he'd have to get a guardianship. Lawrence rubbed his chin. But we can prevent that scenario. I suggest we draw up an advance directive in case of incapacity. In it, you'll specify who you'd like to be your guardian if, theoretically speaking, you become incapacitated. And who should I name? I wondered. Pearl? Pearl would be an excellent choice, Lawrence nodded. But there are other options. You could appoint a professional guardian, a lawyer, or a financial advisor who would act solely in your best interests. Or you could set up a special trust to manage your estate according to predetermined rules. We discussed all the options and eventually decided to appoint Pearl as my potential guardian, with a trustee from Lawrence Law Firm as a backup. Now let's talk about your foreign assets. Lawrence lowered his voice, even though we were alone in the office. Fielding told me about the Venetian apartments and the Swiss account. Does Baxter know about them? I think he suspects something, I answered. Rosamond saw a letter from the Venetian bank recently, and they mentioned plans for a trip to Italy, which they supposedly can't afford because of financial difficulties. We need to check the condition of these assets and perhaps further protect them. Lawrence made another note. I have a colleague in Zurich who specializes in international property law. I will contact him later today. The next morning, I went to see Dr. Eleanor Price. Her clinic was located in a modern medical center on the outskirts of Naperville. The doctor herself was an energetic woman in her 50s with short graying hair and a keen eye. Mrs. Holloway, she shook my hand firmly. Lawrence told me about your situation. It's a rather unpleasant situation, but we'll try to help. The examination was thorough and took almost 3 hours. Dr. Price tested my memory, attention, logical thinking ability, spatial orientation. I took various tests, answered questions, solved puzzles. You're in great shape, Mrs. Holloway, Dr. Price said when we were done. Your cognitive function is normal for your age, and in some aspects even better. I see no signs of dementia or other neurodegenerative diseases. Can you give an official opinion? I asked. Of course, she nodded. I will prepare a detailed report with the results of all the tests, and my professional opinion. It will be ready in 2 days. This document will have weight in court, if it comes to that. I thanked the doctor and was about to leave when she stopped me. Mrs. Holloway, I understand that your son's situation is very stressful. Stress can take a toll on your health, especially at your age. Please take care of yourself. When I returned home, I found an envelope from the Social Security Administration in my mailbox. Inside was a notice that a certain Dr. Richardson had requested access to my medical records in connection with a health evaluation to determine the need for guardianship. It was already an open warfare move. Baxter acted quickly and decisively, using every means available to him. I immediately called Lawrence to inform him of the new development. "Don't panic," he said after listening to me. "This is standard procedure in a custody proceeding, but without your consent or a court order, the office will not release this data. I will immediately prepare a formal objection on your behalf." That evening, I got a call from Delia Harrington, an old book club acquaintance of mine. "Yvonne, darling, you won't believe what I heard today," she began without preamble. "Rose Kingsley has been telling everyone at the club that you have a serious memory problem and that Baxter is going to take custody of you. Is that true?" "Absolutely false," I replied, trying to keep my voice calm, though my insides were seething with indignation. "I had a checkup with the city's top neurologist this morning. I don't have any memory or cognitive problems." "That's what I thought," Delia exclaimed. Telling Rose, Yvonne Holloway quoted entire paragraphs from Middlemarch last week without a single mistake. What dementia? And she said, "Baxter says his mother has good days and bad days. On the bad days, she doesn't even recognize her grandchildren. That's an outrageous lie." My voice shook with anger. I always recognize my grandchildren. It's just that Baxter now forbids me from seeing them unless I give him the house. After I'd spoken to Delia, the phone rang again. This time it was Perry Jameson, my gardener, who came once a week to tidy up the garden. "Mrs. Holloway," he began, embarrassed, "I'm sorry to bother you, but your son called me today. He said you were no longer in need of my services, that you would soon be moved to a nursing home." "What?" I almost screamed. "Perry, the answer is not true. I'm not moving anywhere, and I still need your help with the garden." "I thought something was wrong," he said with a sigh of relief. Minus Mr. Baxter sounded strange, and offered me a job in his garden instead of yours. "Please keep coming as usual," I asked. "And if Baxter calls again, tell him you're only talking to me about work." In the evening, a reply came from Signor Bertolucci in Venice. He confirmed that both apartments were in perfect condition and that the title deeds were in order. Moreover, he said that he had recently received an inquiry from a Mr. Holloway, who was inquiring about the status of the property, claiming to be my son and potential heir. "I have not provided any information, Signora Holloway, as you requested in our previous arrangements," Bertolucci wrote. "But I must warn you that this gentleman was very persistent and mentioned the possibility of legal action. So Baxter did indeed know about the Venetian apartments and was actively trying to get information about them. This confirmed my worst fears. He was not only interested in my Naperville home, but my entire estate. Before going to bed, I checked the front door, windows, and alarm system. After today's events, I felt literally under siege. As I lay in bed trying to sleep, the phone rang again. Baxter's name popped up on the screen. I hesitated, but decided to answer it. It was better to know what he was up to. "Mom," his voice sounded unexpectedly conciliatory, "I want to apologize for what happened at the restaurant. Rosamond and I put too much pressure on you. It was wrong." I remained silent, waiting for him to continue. Baxter never apologized for nothing. "I suggest we start over," he continued. "Let's meet tomorrow, just you and me. We'll talk calmly, without papers or ultimatums. What do you want to talk about, Baxter? I asked you straight out. About the future, Mom. How we can help each other. He paused. I know about Venice, Mom. And the Swiss account. Here it is. Cards on the table. What exactly do you know? My voice sounded calm, though my heart was pounding like crazy. Enough, he answered evasively. Enough to know that you're not the helpless old woman you pretend to be. You have assets that you have never told me, your only son. Those assets are the result of your father's labor and investments. And mine, I said. Fielding and I decided not to tell you about them for certain reasons. What reasons? There was a hint of irritation in his voice. What? I'm not trustworthy? I'm your son. The son who threatens his mother with the loss of her family if she doesn't give him the house, I reminded him. The son who spread rumors about my supposed dementia to neighbors and acquaintances. The son who is trying to cancel my gardener's services. It was as if Fielding had anticipated this behavior. There was silence at the other end of the line. Then Baxter spoke again, in a different tone, cold and calculating. Listen, Mother. We can do this the easy way or the hard way. I propose a compromise. You give me the house, and in return, I'll help you manage the Venetian apartments. My connections in the financial world could be useful, and, of course, you can see your grandchildren again. And if I refuse? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. Then I'll have to be more forceful. His voice became hard. I have contacts in the tax office. Questions about foreign assets and their declaration can cause a lot of problems, Mom. Are you threatening me with a tax audit? I couldn't believe I was hearing this from my own son. I'm offering you a way out that's good for both of us, he replied. Think about it. I'll call you tomorrow to find out your decision. He hung up, and I sat in the dark, shaken to the core. Threats, manipulation, blackmail. My own son had stooped to such methods. Fielding was right to insist on the secrecy of our overseas assets. He saw something in Baxter that I didn't want to see. Boundless greed and a willingness to go to extremes to achieve his goals. I dialed Lawrence's number, even though it was late. I'm sorry to bother you, I said when he answered. But the situation has escalated. Baxter knows about Venice and the Swiss account, and he's threatening a tax audit if I don't give him the house. What a rascal, Lawrence muttered. Don't worry, Yvonne. All taxes on the overseas assets were paid on time, all returns filed. Fielding was very meticulous in these matters. We're safe from a tax audit. I was relieved, but my anxiety wasn't completely gone. What do I do, Lawrence? He won't stop. Today it's threats of a tax audit. Tomorrow it'll be something else. It's time to go on the offensive, the lawyer said firmly. Tomorrow we're filing a formal objection to Dr. Richardson's request, attaching Dr. Price's report as soon as it's ready, and filing a motion for an injunction to stop Baxter from interfering in your affairs and disseminating defamatory information. It's time to show him you're not a defenseless victim. You're right, I agreed after a pause. It's time to stop being defensive. It's time to act decisively. The decision came to me that morning as I watched the robins flitting about the birdhouse in the garden. Fielding always said that the best solutions came to him when he watched nature. The way birds build nests, the way clouds change shape, the way the wind sways the branches of trees. Nature has the answers to everything, Yvonne, he used to say. You just have to be able to see. I decided to organize a dinner for Baxter and Rosamond, one last family dinner, but they wouldn't know about it beforehand. On second thought, I chose Friday, 3 days from now, enough time to get everything ready, but not so much that Baxter would have time to come up with a new plan of attack. After emailing the invitation, I immediately called Lawrence. I want you to have all my asset files ready by Friday, I said. Swiss account statements, documents for the Venetian apartment, an appraisal of the Naperville house. Everything you could possibly need to fully disclose my financial situation. Are you sure? I could hear the doubt in Lawrence's voice. We were just talking about protecting that information from Baxter. I've decided to play the odds, I replied. Baxter already knows the existence of these assets, but not the details. I want to use the element of surprise. Show him all the cards, but on my terms. All right, Lawrence hesitated. I'll prepare the documents, but I'd like to attend this dinner, if you don't mind. I object, I said softly. It should be a family dinner, just Baxter, Rosamond, and me. One last attempt at honest conversation before— I didn't finish my sentence. I didn't finish my sentence. Before what, Yvonne? Lawrence asked cautiously. Before I begin a new chapter of my life, I answered. Perhaps in another country. After talking to Lawrence, I contacted Pearl and told her about my plan. She was supportive, as always, but suggested an extra precaution. I'll be around during dinner, she said firmly. Not in the house, of course, but close enough to come to my aid if anything goes wrong. Do you think Baxter might become aggressive? I asked anxiously. I think a man who threatens his own mother with a tax audit and spreads lies about her mental health is capable of a lot of things, Pearl replied. It's better to be safe. I spent the next 2 days preparing. I got all the necessary documents from Lawrence, ordered food from Baxter's favorite restaurant. I didn't want to waste energy cooking for people who had treated me like this. Prepared a presentation of my assets in the form of a neat folder for each of the guests. I also met with the director of the Sparks of Genius Charitable Foundation, which was dedicated to supporting gifted children from low-income families. We discussed the possibility of creating a Fielding Holloway named Grant to fund architectural education for talented teenagers. The director was excited at the prospect of a major donation and assured me that all the legal formalities could be settled as soon as possible. On the morning of the dinner, I received an email from Signor Bertolucci. He had found me a wonderful cleaning company to prepare the Venetian apartment for my arrival and provided me with the contacts of a lawyer who specialized in immigration issues for Americans moving to Italy. Things were working out just fine. Baxter and Rosamond arrived precisely at 7 o'clock in the evening, unusual punctuality for them. They looked tense but confident. Baxter was carrying a leather folder that I recognized immediately, the same house transfer papers he'd tried to get me to sign at the restaurant. Mom, he kissed my cheek with feigned warmth. You look beautiful. Yvonne, Rosamond kissed me too, leaving a trace of lipstick on my cheek. What a wonderful fragrance. Have you been cooking all day? No, I smiled, pointing to the boxes with the Le Chateau logo on the kitchen table. I ordered delivery from the restaurant. Thought I'd treat myself today. They exchanged quick glances. Ordering from an expensive restaurant didn't fit their idea of an elderly woman who was supposedly struggling financially. Great idea. Baxter smiled awkwardly. The less hassle, the better. We moved into the dining room where I'd already set the table for 3. Crystal glasses, silverware, the finest china just like for a special occasion. Wine? I offered, showing a bottle of expensive Italian Barolo. With pleasure, Baxter replied, clearly confused by my festive mood. Do we have a special occasion? A very special occasion, I smiled, pouring the wine into glasses. Today was the day everything would fall into place. During the first course, we talked about the weather, the latest movies, the stock market, anything but the things that really mattered to each of us. Baxter glanced nervously at his folder, which he placed beside him. Rosamond drank her wine faster than usual. When the main course was served, filet mignon with truffle sauce, Baxter decided to cut to the chase. Mother, he began, setting aside his fork, I'm glad you invited us. It shows that you're ready for a constructive dialogue. Absolutely, I nodded, continuing to eat with visible pleasure. I've been thinking a lot about our last conversation, about what you said about Venice and the Swiss account. Baxter tensed. And what conclusions have you come to? It's time to set the record straight. I blotted my lips with my napkin. But let's finish dinner. We'll serve dessert along with a frank conversation. This postponement clearly annoyed Baxter, but he held back. Rosamond tried to fill the awkward pause with stories about her gallery's latest exhibition, her children's school successes, her plans for a summer vacation. I nodded politely, asked questions, kept the conversation going, as if there was no conflict between us. Finally, when dessert, tiramisu, and espresso was served, I leaned back in my chair and looked at my son and daughter-in-law. So, I began, you mentioned that you knew about my Venetian apartment and Swiss account, and hinted at some trouble with the IRS if I didn't agree to give you the house. Isn't that right? Baxter clearly hadn't expected such bluntness. He choked on his coffee and coughed. Rosamond gave him a worried look. Yeah, I just wanted to say that we could find a mutually beneficial solution, he mumbled, wiping his lips with a napkin. Help each other out. Oh, I totally agree. I smiled and reached over to the side table where the prepared folders lay. So I decided to fully disclose my financial situation so that there would be no misunderstandings between us. I handed each of them a file folder. Baxter opened his with ill-concealed avid interest. Rosamond followed suit, though with more restraint. As you can see, I continued calmly, I do have two properties in Venice. One in the Dorsoduro district is a two-room apartment overlooking the canal, purchased in 1993. The second, in Cannaregio, a three-bedroom apartment purchased in 1998. The total value of both properties today was about 3 million euros. Rosamond's eyes widened as she turned the page and saw pictures of elegant Venetian interiors. On the next page, you'll find the Swiss account. I pointed to the documents. As you can see, there are $7 million in it. All taxes paid, all returns filed on time. There are no problems with the IRS, and there can't be. Baxter swallowed, his eyes fixed on the numbers on the paper. And that's not all, I continued nonchalantly. On the last page, you'll find an estimate of the value of this house, $2,100,000 at today's prices. Not bad for an old woman's burden, is it? Mom, Baxter finally found his voice. I I don't understand. Why did you keep this from us? We could have... What? I interrupted. Help me spend the money? Take care of my welfare? Or maybe start spreading rumors about my dementia even earlier to gain control of my assets? We never, Rosamond began, but I stopped her with a raised hand. Please, let's dispense with the lies today, I said firmly. You both know exactly what you've been doing. Intimidation, manipulation, blackmail, all to gain possession of my property. You even used your own children as leverage, forbidding them to see their grandmother. Baxter blushed. We were acting in your best interests. You just don't understand. No, you don't understand. I looked him straight in the eye. Your father saw this coming, Baxter. He saw something in you that I didn't want to see. Greed, selfishness, a willingness to betray even the people closest to you for money. That's why he and I decided to keep our overseas assets from you. My father never... He hesitated, shocked by my words. Your father loved you, but he wasn't blind to your shortcomings, I said softer. He hoped you would grow past them, that you would become a man of principle and honor like himself. Alas, that was not to be. There was a heavy silence in the room. Rosamond fidgeted nervously with her napkin, avoiding my gaze. Baxter was looking at the documents with an expression that was a mixture of greed, shame, and anger. "What now?" he finally asked hoarsely. "Why did you show us all this? To mock you? To make you realize the magnitude of your mistake," I said calmly, "and to announce my decision. I'm selling the house in Naperville." "What?" Baxter jumped up and down. "To whom? It doesn't matter to you anymore," I shrugged, "because the proceeds are going to the Fielding Holloway Educational Foundation to support gifted children from low-income families who want to study architecture." "You can't do that," Rosamond exclaimed. "This house is part of your grandchildren's inheritance." "I can and I will." I looked at her coldly. "As for the grandchildren, they'll inherit when I'm 80, or when I die, if I die first. That's the condition of the trust I set up yesterday. The money will be used solely for their education and a down payment on a home. Neither you nor Baxter can access it." "You're disinheriting us?" Baxter's voice shook with rage. "No," I shook my head. "I'm protecting my grandchildren's inheritance from parents who are willing to use their own children as weapons in a family conflict. And I'm protecting my property from people who tried to steal it through deceit and manipulation." I paused, took a sip of wine, and continued. "In a week, I'm leaving for Venice, for good. The house will be on the market in 3 days. You have time to pick up any family heirlooms or memorabilia you wish to keep. After that, I don't want you in my house." "You can't just leave," Baxter muttered, clearly shaken by the development. "I can and I will," I repeated. "In Venice, I'll have a beautiful apartment overlooking the canal, $7 million in my account, and freedom from toxic relationships. I'd say that's a great prospect for a woman my age." Rosamond suddenly burst into tears. "What about the children? Are you just going to leave them? They love you." "I love them too," I said softly. "And I'll be in regular video contact with them. When they're older, I'll invite them to Venice for vacations. Without you, of course." It's, it's just revenge," Baxter said. "No," I shook my head. "It's self-defense. And a lesson for both of you. You can't build your happiness on the misery of others, even if they are your parents. Sooner or later, it will backfire on you." Baxter jumped up, knocking over his chair. "You'll regret this. I'll challenge your decision in court. I'll prove you incompetent." "Try it," I smiled without a shadow of fear. "I have a report from Dr. Eleanor Price, the city's leading gerontologist and neurologist, that my cognitive functions are perfectly fine. I have testimony from neighbors and acquaintances that you spread false information about my mental health. And I have a recording of our phone conversation where you threaten me with a tax audit if I don't turn the house over to you. Whose side do you think the court will take?" Baxter turned pale. Rosamond grabbed his arm. "Come on, darling. We need to think this over." They were about to leave, but I stopped them at the door. "Oh, yes, I almost forgot. You can throw away the deed to the house. You won't be needing it anymore." When the door closed behind them, I felt a strange lightness. It was as if a heavy weight I'd been carrying for years had suddenly disappeared. I knew that Baxter and Rosamond wouldn't give up so easily, that there would be more attempts to challenge my decision, perhaps even lawsuits. But now I had a plan, I had proof of their bad faith, and I was determined to defend myself and my independence. I called Pearl, who was waiting in her car nearby. "Everything went according to plan," I said. "You can come in now." Baxter and Rosamond had already left. When Pearl arrived, we opened a second bottle of wine and settled down in the living room. I told her in detail about Baxter and Rosamond's reaction to my news. "Oh, how I wish I could have seen their faces," Pearl laughed, imagining the scene. "Especially when you showed them the Swiss bank statement." "They were shocked," I smiled, remembering, "especially Rosamond. She must have thought it was some small savings, not millions. And now what? Pearl asked more seriously. Are you really leaving in a week? Yes, I nodded. The tickets are already bought. Signor Bertolucci will arrange a meeting with an immigration lawyer as soon as I arrive. I'll leave most of my things here. The realtor will sell them along with the house. I'll take only the essentials and memorabilia. I'll miss you. Pearl took my hand. 50 years of friendship, and suddenly you're on another continent. Modern technology works wonders. I squeezed her hand in return. We'll talk by video link every week, and you should definitely come visit me. Venice is gorgeous in the spring. We talked late into the night, reminiscing about the past, discussing the future. Pearl stayed the night. The house had plenty of guest rooms, and neither of us wanted to be alone after such an emotionally intense evening. In the morning, I woke up with a sense of newness and freedom. Birds were singing outside the window, and the sun was casting a golden light on the room. I thought of Fielding. What would he say about my decision? He'd probably approve. He'd always appreciated grit and determination. Life is too short to compromise your conscience, Yvonne, he often said. The next week was a busy one. I met with a realtor, signed a contract to sell the house, selected the things I would take with me to Venice, and contacted the Sparks of Genius charity to make a donation. Lawrence helped with the legal side of all the transactions, making sure Baxter couldn't challenge any of my decisions. Baxter called several times, first with threats, then with attempts at reconciliation, finally with offers of compromise. I was polite but adamant. No compromises, no concessions. Just clear boundaries and a complete end to the toxic relationship. On the day I left, I walked around the house one last time, saying goodbye to every room, every corner that held memories of happy years with Fielding. It was a little sad to leave the place where most of my life had been spent, but that sadness was mixed with the exciting anticipation of a new chapter. Pearl drove me to the airport. We hugged goodbye, both of us with tears in our eyes. Be happy, she whispered to me. You deserve it after everything you've been through. Thank you for everything, I replied, for your support, for your friendship, for always being there for me. When the plane left the ground, I felt the last thread that bound me to the past break. Ahead was Venice, the city of canals and bridges, the city of art and beauty, the city that Fielding and I loved so much. Now it would be my new home. Signor Bertolucci met me at Marco Polo Airport and accompanied me by water cab to my apartment in Dorsoduro. As the boat glided down the Grand Canal, past majestic palazzos and ancient churches, I could feel the heaviness of the last few months slowly fading away. Venice was welcoming me into its arms, promising peace and new possibilities. The apartment looked exactly as I remembered it. Elegant rooms with high ceilings, antique furniture, windows overlooking the quiet canal. Signor Bertolucci had taken care of everything. Fresh flowers in vases, a bottle of Prosecco in the refrigerator, clean linens on the bed, all ready for a new life to begin. In the evening, I sat by the window, watching the last rays of sunlight coloring the canal water in golden tones. In my hands, I held Fielding's photograph, the only thing I had put in a prominent place when I arrived. Here I am, darling, I said quietly, looking at his smiling face, starting a new chapter. No Baxter, no toxicity, no manipulation, just me, you in my heart, and this beautiful city. I think you'd approve. In that moment, I felt a strange calm and confidence. It was like Fielding was really there to support my decision. I knew there were still many challenges ahead, adapting to a new country, learning the language, building a new social network, but I also knew that I had the strength, resources, and determination to overcome all the obstacles. Tomorrow would be the start of a new day, a new life, and I was ready for this adventure. At 68, with a Venetian apartment, a Swiss account, and freedom from toxic relationships. Not too bad for an old lady who was considered helpless and forgetful by her own son.